the Canadian people want to see a deal. They want to get this thing over with because it's so volatile. You can't even buy whiskey in Ontario from Tennessee right now.
Canada is willingly stepping into America's economic trap. Kevin O'Leary's stark warning on Fox Business hit home just as U.S. Commerce Secretary Lutnick issued his blunt ultimatum. If Canada doesn't open its markets, tariffs won't just stay, they'll get higher. And as Washington tightens its grip, anger is boiling inside Canada. A new Fraser Institute report reveals that in 2024, the average Canadian family spent more on taxes than on food, housing, and clothing combined. People are asking the same bitter question. Are we paying taxes to protect our country or just to watch it buckle under U.S. pressure? While Canadians tighten their belts, provinces are breaking away from Ottawa's control, steering themselves directly toward the U.S. orbit.
Canada is not open to us. They need to open their market. Unless they're willing to open their market, they're going to pay a tariff. I think the president's going to open between $300 and $400 billion of opportunity for Americans.
Lutnick's statement was more than diplomatic pressure. It was an economic ultimatum. Open markets, reduce barriers for U.S. firms, or face higher tariffs. The 25% tariff on steel and aluminum has already frozen major construction projects in Ontario, forcing companies to lay off workers. Beverage and food processing industries have lost billions of Canadian dollars as aluminum costs soared, forcing plants to cut production. Smaller textile and home appliance manufacturers have stopped exporting to the U.S., switching instead to act as subcontractors for American companies. But Canadians aren't just angry at Washington, they're furious with their own government. A Toronto resident told CBC, "We're paying record-high taxes, but Ottawa just sits there while America squeezes us harder every day."
According to Fraser Institute, 46% of an average family's income now goes to taxes, federal, provincial, and consumption taxes combined. Meanwhile, spending on food, housing, and clothing together accounts for less than 38% of income. A family in Vancouver told a local paper, "We have to choose between paying property tax or buying fresh food weekly, and now we hear Ottawa might give in to the U.S. Whose interests are we paying for?"
The average Canadian family with an income of nearly $115,000 paid more than $48,000 in total taxes.
On social media, the hashtag taxed but ignored is spreading rapidly, with posts mocking the federal government. We pay taxes so Ottawa can stand there and watch America tighten the noose. While citizens grow restless, provinces are quietly, and sometimes openly, charting their own paths.
When we did some polling to find out how people felt about pipelines, we saw over 70% support in most provinces, including a majority support in Quebec.
Alberta has already signed preliminary agreements with U.S. oil giants, expanding exports directly without waiting for federal approval. Saskatchewan is coordinating with Alberta on rail logistics to prioritize mineral shipments to the U.S. despite Ottawa's trade regulations. Ontario publicly calls for a Buy Canadian policy, but major companies are quietly shifting production lines to Texas to avoid double tariffs. 80% of Alberta's oil already flows to the U.S., and the share is rising annually. Major logistics hubs are relocating from Quebec to Michigan to benefit from U.S. tax advantages. American investors are quietly gaining control over critical Canadian oil and mineral supply chains. Even a senior economic advisor close to Prime Minister Carney admitted privately, "If this keeps up, in a few years, Ottawa won't be negotiating as a nation, it'll be watching as provinces sign their own deals with Washington." Canada is no longer just negotiating with the U.S., it's being pulled into its orbit. Washington sets the rules with tariffs and ultimatums. Canadians pay record taxes, yet see no protection for their own economy. Provinces are acting alone, while Ottawa looks more like a bystander than a leader. At this pace, the question isn't whether Canada can win a trade war, it's whether there will be a truly independent Canadian economy left to defend.
Premier Danielle Smith argues a recent by-election is proof Alberta's separatist movement has never had more support, pointing to one rural riding where the Alberta Republican Party earned about 17% of the vote.
I take that seriously, and I hope that the federal government takes that seriously.
Premier Danielle Smith just made a statement that hit Canada like a political earthquake. Albertans' desire to separate from Canada has never been higher. This isn't just anger bubbling on social media or a few protest signs on the highway. This is a movement, organized, legal, and growing fast. Alberta, the economic engine of Canada, is no longer talking about politely asking for permission. It's talking about a future where it stands alone, making its own rules without Ottawa's leash. The question is no longer whether Alberta is frustrated frustrated. The real question is, has Canada entered a new age of division, and can Ottawa stop it?
Smith believes separatist sentiments were created by Ottawa. She argues it's up to the federal government to fix it, pitching proposals like coast-to-coast oil and gas shipping access.
If they make the changes that we're requesting, then I suspect they can take the air out of that movement.
The shift is undeniable. According to an Angus Reid poll from May 2025, 37% of Albertans now support leaving Canada, the highest level ever recorded. Among United Conservative Party (UCP) voters, that number skyrockets to 65%. And here's the real kicker. 70% of Albertans say they understand why people want to separate, even if they're not personally ready to vote yes. This isn't sudden anger, it's the product of years of resentment. Keystone XL canceled, costing billions. Over $500 billion in lost investment driven away by federal regulations. And since 1980, Alberta has sent $653 billion more to Ottawa than it's received, only to be met with federal policies that cripple its oil industry. Albertans feel like they're paying for a system designed to hold them back, and those numbers show they're done quietly waiting.
It's affirming our Constitution. It is doing the kind of advocacy that we have, doing the legal challenges that we have, and engaging in diplomacy and trying to figure out if we can find a pathway. I did that in my very first conversation with Mark Carney's predecessor, and I will do the same thing with him.
Smith insists she's not calling for independence, but look at what she's doing. She passed Bill 54, lowering the threshold to trigger a referendum to just 10% of eligible voters, around 177,000 signatures. The time to collect those signatures? 120 days, making a 2026 referendum more than just a distant idea. Alberta is already building its own provincial police force to replace the RCMP. Plans are underway for Alberta to collect provincial personal income taxes directly, cutting Ottawa out. Export independence is being built right now, with twin rail lines to Prince Rupert and talk of a full BC Churchill trade corridor. Smith calls this provincial autonomy. Critics call it what it looks like, a framework for a province that could function independently from Canada the moment it decides to leave. The federal government can laugh this off, as it has with every West Wants Out bumper sticker in the past, but this time is different. The movement is organized. The Alberta Prosperity Project now has over 66,000 members and reaches 500,000 people every month through live streams and town halls. The West is watching. Saskatchewan and Manitoba already back many of Smith's autonomy plans. Even British Columbia, while hesitant, has not slammed the door on Alberta's economic proposals.
I'm hearing internally that we're already somewhere over 250,000 signatures, and that we'll likely have 600,000.
If Ottawa ignores this, what happens next? Hypothetically, Alberta could gather the required signatures within months and hold a referendum by 2026. And if that vote turns into a majority yes, Canada would face its biggest national unity crisis since Quebec's near separation in 1995. Except this time it's Alberta holding much of the country's energy wealth. What if Alberta does vote to leave? Here's a hypothetical scenario. Economically, Alberta could rapidly attract foreign investment by loosening regulations, turning itself into the Texas of the North. But losing Alberta would hammer Canada's GDP and weaken its energy exports. Politically, Ottawa would almost certainly invoke the Clarity Act, dragging Alberta into a legal war that could last years. Socially, an independent Alberta could trigger a domino effect, pushing other Western provinces to demand more autonomy or even follow Alberta's lead. None of this is certain, but every step Alberta takes towards self-governance makes this scenario harder to dismiss. Danielle Smith may insist she's not pushing for independence, but the numbers, the new laws, and the deliberate building of parallel provincial systems tell a different story. Alberta is closer than ever to deciding its own fate. The question is no longer, does Alberta want to leave Canada? It's this: when Alberta is ready to leave, will Ottawa still have the power or the trust of Albertans to stop it?
So as you heard, the federal government continues to face mounting pressure to get a deal done with the United States.
I think we do need an urgent resolution, but not at all costs. So I do think it's good to put some urgency on this, both for the Canadian economy and the U.S. economy.
Canada is in the middle of a trade standoff it never asked for, but it may still be able to shape how this story ends. As Trump's 35% tariffs loom, many expected Canada to cave quickly under pressure. But that hasn't happened. Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney has taken a disciplined approach, deliberate, methodical, and unusually quiet in contrast to Trump's headline-driven playbook. His goal is not to win a public shouting match, but to secure real exemptions where it matters most: energy, steel, aluminum, and autos. This isn't about getting to zero tariffs. Even Carney has acknowledged that a no-tariff agreement is no longer realistic. But there is room to shift the outcome from total imposition to selective protection. The likely landing zone? A general tariff rate in the 8 to 10% range, with key sectors carved out. That wouldn't be a victory in full, but it would be a reversal of momentum, away from Trump's terms and toward Canada's priorities. And that shift matters, because this time, the pressure isn't one-sided.
I watched the show this morning. They were talking about, well, when's he going to make the deal? The deals are already made. The letters are the deals. The deals are made. There are no deals to make.
Trump doesn't use tariffs as tools. He uses them as declarations. Letters sent to trade partners, including Canada, aren't warnings. They're, in his view, the final word. The letters are the deals, as his team describes it. But the strategy is unstable. Inconsistent deadlines, sudden shifts, and unilateral decisions have created confusion across industries. Even close allies don't know whether they're negotiating or reacting. And this isn't just about politics. The economic impact is beginning to show. According to the San Francisco Federal Reserve, U.S. GDP could shrink by 0.4% over the medium term due to these tariffs. Inflation has already climbed to 2.7% as of June, partly driven by increased import costs. And 45% of all U.S. imports are inputs, materials and components used by domestic manufacturers. When tariffs go up, so do their production costs. That means higher prices, slower hiring, and less room to invest. These are not hypothetical risks. They're playing out in real time. Canada, however, has more at stake. Its economy is more exposed, more export-driven, and deeply tied to U.S. demand. A report from Yale's Budget Lab estimates that Canada's GDP could fall by as much as 2.1% if the 35% tariffs are fully implemented without relief. Provinces like Ontario and Quebec, both manufacturing hubs, would feel the sharpest pain. But Canada is not standing still. While negotiations continue, Canadian exports to non-U.S. partners are rising. Canada is also accelerating trade outreach in Europe, Singapore, and India. This quiet realignment won't solve the short-term pain, but it strengthens Canada's hand in the long game. Meanwhile, Carney's team is coordinating provincial subsidies, investment guarantees, and federal assistance to help targeted industries weather the uncertainty. Steel, auto, and clean energy sectors are being stabilized, not dismantled.
Couple of months. But we should push, but not for a deal at all costs. And we've got to be willing to hold our line. And I think Prime Minister Carney has generally done a very good job.
A deal may still be reached before August 1st, but it won't erase the damage. Even if tariffs are reduced, the shock to supply chains, investor confidence, and bilateral trust won't be easily undone. This episode is about more than numbers. It's about how power is used and how it is resisted. Trump may still get his headline. But if Canada emerges with key sectors protected and a broader strategy for independence intact, the real story may not be one of submission. It may be one of quiet defiance. And in a world where trade wars are now fought with tweets and tariff letters, that kind of defiance might be the only form of strength that still matters.